All right, everybody, welcome back. We're talking about policy implementation, and we're going to talk more about kind of the agencies and organizations that make up the executive part of the government. So everybody's aware of the president and the vice president. But underneath the president and the vice president, inside the executive branch of our government, we have a whole bunch of different organizations that all work together to both create policy and implement policy. The most kind of well known of these are the 15 executive departments, right? So everybody's aware of, there's the Department of Justice, there's the Department of Defense, there's the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Commerce, and Labor, and Health and Human Services. There's a whole bunch of these. Each one is headed by a secretary, right? So the Department of Justice is headed by the Attorney General. Homeland Security is headed by the Secretary of Homeland Security. And those secretaries, those cabinet ministers, have a huge amount of power in how their departments are run, what their particular slice of that government pie, how it works, how it implements policy, etc. But each one of those 15 executive departments is split up into bureaus. These are kind of sub-agencies, right? So for criminal justice, the most obvious one is the Department of Justice has a bunch of different bureaus underneath it. Probably the most famous being the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, right? And then Homeland Security has, the Customs and Border Protection and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and each one of these 15 departments has a whole bunch of different kind of sub organizations underneath it that it's able to kind of control and guide and provide funding for and provide leadership for. Now, the next kind of organization within the executive are independent agencies. So these are kind of the equivalent of the FBI or the ATF or the those sub-organizations we talked about on the last slide. But they're not under any cabinet secretary. They're not in one of those 15 departments, usually because they don't fit well or they're too large or there's some other reason why they're just not technically under one of those 15 cabinet ministers, right? Examples here include things like NASA, right? One of my favorites. They don't have to report directly to any given secretary. The head of NASA just kind of reports directly to the president or the vice president, right? The Environmental Protection Agency, another example, the CIA, all of these are kind of independent groups that don't fall under the command of one of those 15 departments. Now we're getting into the kind of weird semi-public, semi-private kind of organizations, and there's two different kinds of those. There's the independent regulatory commissions, right? And the president gets to appoint their leaders, but they're also not directly under the president's control. The president usually can't override these agency heads when they make regulatory decisions or when they make enforcement decisions. Example here, the Federal Reserve, right? The main national bank, the central bank of the United States, the leaders are appointed by the president. All of their kind of profits and any money they make goes to the national treasury. But they are also semi-independent. The president can't go to the Federal Reserve and say, I order you to do this. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, they regulate financial investments and stocks and bonds and all that kind of investing stuff. And then, of course, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. They regulate things like who gets to use certain frequencies on the radio spectrum and who gets to broadcast TV on certain wavelengths and who gets to use radio station frequencies and such in any given area. So these are all kind of regulatory agencies that are part of the government, but are also a little bit independent of the government also. Very similar are government corporations, and these are businesses. These are groups that are attempting to make a profit, but they're run by the government, right? And again, the leaders get to be appointed by the president. but they're also semi-independent in that, the president can't come in and just kind of control what they're doing. Examples here include the Postal Service, right? So the head of the Postal Department is appointed by the president, but they're also out to kind of make money, right? We have to pay for stamps. We have to pay for sending packages through the Postal Service. There's also the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was set up during the Great Depression, and they still to this day run a bunch of everything from electricity generation to land use and land management. And then, of course, there's the FDIC, which insures banks, right? So if a bank collapses, the FDIC will say, okay, everybody who had kept their money in that bank, you can come to us and we'll give you your money back, even though your bank has collapsed, as a way to increase the faith and trust of the American people in the banking system. All right, we're going to go ahead and take another break. Thank you so much for watching.